When I left, there was a Liberal Prime Minister who was making excuses about breaking promises, running massive deficits, costs, crime, chaos were all out of control. And whereas today, we have a Liberal Prime Minister breaking promises, making excuses, running massive deficits with costs, crime, and chaos out of control.
Mr. Speaker, I understand the Minister, or the Minister, promotion. Come on over. I understand the Leader of the Opposition was busy. He missed the largest tax cut for 22 million Canadians. He missed the cut on the GST for new homes.
Isn't it nice that they're all back?
Oh, we've missed them.
Do you think they missed us?
I, for one, missed you guys.
Oh, I missed you too. I'm Catherine Cullen, host of CBC's The House.
I'm Daniel Thibeault, Radio-Canada's bureau chief for Ottawa and host of Les Coulisses du Pouvoir.
And I'm Jason Markusoff, producer and writer for CBC in Calgary, focusing on the West.
And we're also back. This is House Party, a weekly podcast diving into the big burning questions driving the political conversation. This week we're asking, as MPs return to the Hill and Mark Carney tries to make good on some election promises, how is Carney tackling all of the crises? So yeah, we are back along with the House of Commons because given how huge everything the government has to do feels at the moment, we thought we'd do a short run starting this week with the start of the sitting until at least Thanksgiving to help get everyone caught up on what is happening in Canadian politics. So let's start, guys, as we always do with our big question. How is the Prime Minister doing with this multitude of crises? Jason?
I think if we'd thought about what our answer would be, what we'd be looking at in terms of Victor and how he's handling the crises, it would have been one question. Do we still have tariffs? Has he tamed the savage Trump? And obviously now we're in this more complex, thorny place. The tariffs are still there. Carney can boast all the time that, we have some of the lowest tariffs in the world, but I think people are still feeling them in certain industries like steel, auto, aluminum, forestry. So he's tried to work on a whole bunch of other, I don't know if we can call them little things because they're big things like this $13 billion housing agency and, the major projects and his major industrial defense plans. So he's doing a lot of things. I don't know if people are going to see it as getting the thing done.
Yeah. It's interesting because I totally agree with Jason. He's doing a lot of stuff. And I think he still has a bit of political capital that he can spend on that. Like it's a very, very young government, and he's got like many balls in the air, trying to make everything land at the right place at the right time as fast as possible. The question is, can he deliver on all the promises that he made during the campaign, after the campaign? He's already had some issues with, I'm going to solve the issue with the United States during the summer, and we're not.
That didn't quite work. Spoiler alert. Didn't quite work out.
You've missed the news for the past 3 months. It's not solved yet. Yeah. And so I think that's the biggest challenge in front of him is landing all those files, those projects, everything at the right place at the right time. That might prove to be more complicated than what he thought it would be, I think.
Jason's word thorny, I think, is a good one, right? We had that soaring rhetoric of the election campaign. Now that ambition is meeting the complexities of reality, some of the challenges. And so, I'd say mixed bag, perhaps, is the result so far. I do want to dig into these crises that he's facing and, take a closer look at some of the challenges. Sure. But first, we got to talk about the big news of the last 24 hours, guys, which is this news that Christia Freeland is, for the second time in less than a year, she's quit cabinet. She is going to be a special representative for Canada focused on the reconstruction of Ukraine. Dan, what do you make of this?
Oh, okay. Well, I don't think she's coming back this time around. I think she so twice. Yeah. I think we've heard some, and you probably heard the same thing around the Hill. She was not overly happy with the role she had. She was not super comfortable in that particular file. I think she was happy to be part of the election, to be part of the team. She was happy to not be left behind when Carney rebuilt his cabinet, but the challenge was just not there. I heard over the past couple of weeks that she was looking around, trying to see if there was anything interesting. I think, and this was told to me by someone close to her, I think She found it to be complicated to find something interesting because of the fact that Trump hated her so much and made so many negative comments about her in public. And I think that made her not a very suitable candidate for some appointments. I'm thinking DUN, for example, or anything where you have to
NATO,
deal more directly with the U.S. It would have been a bit of a toxic relationship with the U.S. So I think this is a way for her to find a bit of a new challenge or something a little different without having to run into the U.S. problems there.
Jason, do you think this is like good, bad, neutral for Mark Carney?
Neutral. I mean, it's losing a familiar face, somebody people know. Certainly, it's a lot better off than when she left the cabinet under Trudeau. She knows how to write a letter, and this was not. She was very, very gracious with this letter, even if she is leaving because she might be leaving because she wants to do something else. I'll note that this is now Carney has both of his former leadership contenders, Gould and Freeland on the benches, and also it'll gives him this opportunity to promote somebody else and put somebody from his own team in there. I guess it won't be a by-election for Freeland's seat, but certainly there are a whole bunch of other new MPs that could be there.
Which is probably avoiding the by-election right now before having to table and pass the budget is probably a good thing for him. Like, you should probably try not to lose any MPs now.
Pretty safe Liberal seat. It does say, I will feel like, in a way, a closing of the loop of what started December 16th, right? When she decided to step away, but ultimately kind of shove Justin Trudeau overboard, the failed run ultimately to become Prime Minister. This does feel like the natural conclusion to that.
Yeah. So to loop it back to what we were saying earlier, I think this is not a crisis compared to anything else that he or the Liberal government's dealing with right now.
No, for sure. Much easier. Yeah. Crisis. And there's a lot of them. Big stuff on Carney's plate right now. Who was elected on a promise to deal with Trump. We mentioned that. Build big national project, trying to make them land super fast and see something that would redefine the Canadian economy. And I think that's probably something that's more on his mind right now than Freeland's departure from cabinet. There's a lot of stuff there. I was in your neck of the woods, Jason, last week. You're in Calgary. I was in Edmonton, but it's not that far. It was.
Come on, 3 hours.
I know.
It's a hike.
I would have done just a quick visit, but it was a little busy. But yeah, there was the first round of national project were announced, and there's a couple of things in there that I found interesting that I thought were interesting. First of all, they're pretty easy pick, the one that he threw there. Like, for most of them, there's probably like the shovel in the ground already happened.
Yeah. A lot of this building is underway.
Months ago, like Contrecoeur in Montreal, the expansion of the Montreal port, they've already started to work on the ground there. So those are pretty safe bet, should I say, that something's going to come out. And so probably, what do you call that? Low-hanging fruits for Mr. Carney. I think it's going to get more complicated, and it's going to get more complicated, especially on the energy front and the oil file. And I'd be interested to hear what you have to say about that, Jason, because I don't think I've ever heard Danielle Smith being so nice in reaction to a federal Liberal Prime Minister announcement. There was no pipeline. There's nothing for oil except for the carbon capture, the Pathways project. And yet she was like demanding Albertans to be patient and to look at the next wave of project. I don't know. What did you make of her reaction?
I couldn't have never imagined in a million years that if the headline is "Pipeline left off major list of projects," that Danielle Smith would come out and say, "This is a Prime Minister who gets it." It's like you sort of had to wait, was that did somebody make an AI statement of hers? Is this deep fake? No, Mark Carney and Danielle Smith, first of all, seem to have a very good personal rapport, which can be very, very important for a whole bunch of different leaders. Certainly, it seems like it's mattered for Carney and Doug Ford, having a mostly on-again relationship, even though he didn't love this list of projects. There seems like there's a whole bunch of things that he's said to her that give her a whole bunch of faith that pipelines, carbon capture, maybe erasing the emissions cap on oil and gas could be all coming her way. And I'm sure that he is very, very happy to see that he can weather headlines like "we're not getting a pipeline just yet," and Danielle Smith standing up and applauding everything else he said.
I'll point out one thing, and I think he's enjoying a very good relationship with every premier of the country right now. I'd like to bring you back to 2015. Mr. Trudeau was in power, and he was enjoying a very good relation with every premier of this country, and that disappeared very, very quickly. So it's not a guarantee that it's going to be as good for Mr. Carney in 6 months, 8 months, maybe less than that.
Whenever the next Alberta election is, fair enough.
I think, though, one thing we have to consider when we talk about this sort of economic major projects moment, we kind of have to take a step back and talk about Donald Trump. I mean, you referenced earlier the idea that Mark Carney was hired by Canadians, such as it was, to deal with Donald Trump. He said during the election campaign, at one point he did actually say, we are going to win this trade war.
Yeah.
I think it is very hard to call what's happening right now winning. I mean, I'm struck by the fact that the government does continually say, well, we have the best deal on tariffs in the world. And I admit that one puts a little bit of a bee in my bonnet sometimes, because it suggests that there was a deal on tariffs, when in fact what they're talking about is CUSMA, USMCA, whatever you want to call it. What they're really talking about is NAFTA. I mean, this is a deal that's decades old in Canada. And yes, it was renegotiated under Justin Trudeau, but this isn't a deal that Mark Carney got to solve this issue. Now, I think it's also important to acknowledge that at the time that some of this was going down, I don't think it was clear just how profound Donald Trump's commitment to tariffs was. Or maybe it was, but a lot of the world said, like, he's not really going to go all the way.
Yeah.
And in fact, like,
And
everybody is
he
facing
did.
these tariffs now. Yes.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think during the campaign, everyone saw that as so that's a bit of a crazy moment, and how far is he willing to go? Probably not that far, but we probably should get the guy who's best suited to negotiate with the guy on the other side. But the thinking was there's going to be a negotiation, and I think what we're seeing right now is that it's not that easy to have a discussion that leads to a resolution for Canada or any other country, for that matter. And Mr. Carney banked on that during the campaign and probably realized fairly rapidly that it was not going to be as easy as he was hoping for, despite all the meetings and the discussions and the travel to Washington and the Dominique Leblanc sitting in a room with Howard Lutnick and
For hours and hours.
and I would say that at this point today, we're pretty much where we were 4 months ago. In fact, we have less counter tariffs, and we've abandoned a couple of things along the way to try to make things better, and that didn't make a difference at all.
Yeah, and so it's interesting because I think, like, perhaps there's some understanding from the public that the situation wasn't quite what was envisaged. On the other hand, he said he was going to do it. He hasn't gotten it done, and that leaves us to sort of the other half of his pitch to Canadians, which is I'm gonna grow the country. Another interesting part of this, Jason, is national unity. Right? This talk of Albertan separation. I mean, we talked about how Carney's getting along with the premiers on the national unity front. How we doing?
I mean, part of national unity to me is everybody on the same page? I mean, is there a shared sense of mission? Like there was back in, March when, Mike Myers said elbows up on SNL, and then that became a big political slogan. And that's probably if you think of one phrase that the public may associate with Mark Carney now, it's Mike Myers elbows up, and people keep saying, oh, where are his elbows now? And that's always the big criticism. I don't think people have lost the faith in him and this sense of mission. I mean, maybe the anti-Americanism has I don't know if it's eased, but it's crested. Stayed a certain level. In terms of Alberta, there are still the people who are saying separatism. This happened in past elections, like in 2019 when people were really, really frustrated with Trudeau, and there was this big Wexit movement starting to form. That eased once time wore off. There is still that. This one is also eased. Like, people aren't talking about it as much, but there could still be this referendum that supporters of Danielle Smith, people within her party, are going to push. And that's TBD. And I think a lot of it, we'll see how Danielle Smith, she talks about wanting to tame it. And we'll see how those people who believe in separatism and are so disdainful and skeptical and cynical of Ottawa will feel towards Danielle Smith now seeming to give at least a tentative embrace to Mark Carney.
can I just say that how weird it is to talk about referendum and national unity and
Not talking about Quebec.
Oh, don't worry. We'll have lots of time next
No,
year.
we'll get to
do
that point, I'm
Daniel.
sure.
We one other thing we should talk about if we're talking about sort of the national economic picture is the budget, Dan. That is certainly, I don't know whether we call it a crisis, but it is certainly a challenge that Carney is facing. What do you make of how he is approaching this budget?
They've started setting the table for something that's going to be tough for Canadians. That's going to show a bigger deficit than what we were expecting last year. If you're asking me, I think they started a little on the late. If I'd been the government, I would have started setting up that particular scene earlier in the summer just to prepare Canadians. Because from everything I hear, the shock is going to be big and it's going to be real, and we're going to feel it. And it's a complicated exercise. François-Philippe Champagne, the finance minister, went to his colleagues and asked to bring back plans for 15% cuts over the next 3 years. I'm told that some of the plans were not super satisfying to the finance minister. I think some of his colleagues may not have taken the exercise as seriously as the finance minister wanted them to take it. So there's some work to do on that, trying to find some savings on contracts as well. And then splitting the budget in two columns, one operational and one investments. It's more complicated than what they figured it would be before. And the next phase is going to be like who's going to side with the government and support that thing. I'm sincerely hoping we're not going back into an election campaign anytime soon.
Oh my God!
But right
I mean,
now,
we get to bring House Party back for even longer, so there's that.
but there's no one lining up right now to say, I'm willing to look at what the government's going to put at the table, and it's part of the political play and the political show that happens on the Hill. But still, it's gonna be a bit of a rough ride for the government.
Okay. There's lots more House Party coming up, even though we're not in an election campaign, right after the break.
Putting aside the economy for a moment, there are a host of other issues that require attention from this government. They're getting heat on, and a lot of those are being driven by the opposition. Here's Conservative Deputy Leader Melissa Lensman.
We still have an immigration crisis, we have a housing crisis, we have a cost of living crisis. So we're going to oppose the government where it makes sense. We are going to support things that make sense, and we are going to expose what they're not telling us.
So how much are the Conservatives driving this government's agenda right now, aside from the economic issues, Catherine?
I mean, this is the thing that Pierre Poilievre made his political career on as a leader, right? The Conservatives like to say, well, I heard Andrew Scheer saying on Power and Politics, well, Pierre Poilievre's been right on every political question of the last 10 years. I think the Conservatives would have to acknowledge he also just lost the last election. So that's, if you believe he's won the battles, he did not seem to win the war, but they are continuing to fight another day, to really torture this metaphor. I do think the issues they've chosen here, particularly affordability, housing, crime, are very visceral, and I suppose immigration too, right? Like crime, you look at the numbers in some of the big cities, violent crime is in fact going down. But the nature of the political conversation around crime, it's ever been thus, is, you hear a terrible story like that 8-year-old boy in Toronto, and I covered this a bit this summer, who was shot and killed in his bed. Like, it is just unbearable. And I think as people, we say, well, maybe the numbers say things are down, but when the father who died defending his family from home invaders, you say, well, this has to stop. And so there's an emotional element to, I think, a lot of what Pierre Poilievre is pushing on. And he is, if you look at immigration, for instance. I don't know if Mark Carney would be talking as frequently about the importance of reforming the temporary foreign worker program if Pierre Poilievre hadn't come out and said, let's kill the whole thing, aside from agricultural workers. And it certainly helped Pierre Poilievre's cause that BC Premier David Eby, NDP Premier, who Pierre Poilievre spent a lot of time attacking, came out and said the same thing. So I think they are driving the agenda on these issues. I would say especially crime and some of the conversation around immigration. And affordability is it's been a visceral issue for a long time. And Pierre Poilievre knows how to press on those political buttons, connect with people on those issues.
We saw, it's a bit of an acknowledgement from the Liberals that they've neglected those files under the previous administration, if I may use that term. They were not cost of living, housing, all that stuff, immigration, crime. During the campaign, some Liberals will tell you that if they had focused a little more on the crime, especially in the 905, they might have been able to get their majority there. And because they kind of stepped away from that particular file, thinking it was not that important, it takes a lot of space. And you're totally right. Stats are one thing, but the examples we hear about, not every day, but on a regular basis, it really stir up the imagination of Canadians. And that's something that, whether it's true or not, you need to address it.
Well, and whether the federal government is actually the one responsible. I mean, some of the stuff around bail reform, yes, that goes back to the federal government, but these issues are very multifaceted. Sometimes it has to do with how the jails are being run, but both some of the premiers and the Conservatives have been successful in putting a lot of this.
But to be able to neutralize, you need to take the lead. Car being stolen. The federal at some point did that big thing in Ottawa.
Car theft summit, yeah.
Yes, let's talk about car theft. I mean, there's some stuff that the feds can do, but a lot of the work is done by provincial, municipal police.
But everybody finds this pressure. You find the pressure point where you can actually hit the government, the federal government. I mean, if Pierre Poilievre had just widely harped on inflation back in the day, it wouldn't have gone anywhere. The fact that he focused it all on the consumer carbon tax and won that issue. And that same thing is happening right now with bail. It's a lot of things seem to be focusing on, if they can fix bail, if they can get these repeat offenders off the street. From Winnipeg's mayor to Alberta Premier Danielle Smith to a whole host of other police leaders and political leaders, they're all pushing on bail. And I think there's a real pressure, an expectation now that Mark Carney will act on that. And I wonder if we're seeing something similar developing on temporary foreign workers now that Pierre Poilievre, knowing where even that numbers are down, you can't say immigration is still rising. He's found this new, more drastic proposal to make.
Another one of these affordability issues in this same bucket is housing. But that's one, Dan, where the federal government has just taken some action, right?
Yeah.
They've built the Build Canada Homes agency that's supposed to build more affordable housing. How do you think they're doing and that we heard a lot about that during the election too. How's that going?
And that's interesting because the goal. So the Liberals are pursuing the same goals than the Conservatives. They're going at it in a much different way, right? So Conservatives say the private sector should be able to do it, and we should just go after the municipalities when they're doing something that gets in the way. It takes like 6 months for permit delivery or something like that. The federal government under Mark Carney says, a big agency will streamline the process, take care of everything at once, and make things go up faster. And I think it's going to be interesting to see if it works. And it needs to work for him if he wants to be able to say to Canadian, I did the right thing. I was on the work site this last Sunday where he was doing...
Did you get a construction hat?
No, I stayed far away. I don't look good with the construction hat, the three-piece suit and the construction hat.
More of a lover than a fighter.
Yeah,
I gotcha.
But he's really banking a lot on that. And everyone that I was talking to there was saying, this is going to work. It's going to make things go faster.
And Carney knows that he has to make sure, while yes, Trump is still going to be the big issue in kind of those broad economies, getting projects done, doing things the way we haven't done in years is a big part of it. But they've been told by that pollster Leger who came in to their cabinet retreat, planning committee or whatever they called it, that Trump as an issue is waning in the public mind, and people are thinking about these other issues that were kind of the Trudeau era that were really harming him. Crime, housing affordability. So these are ones that he has. Now, the one that isn't, the polls aren't showing as a big concern for the public, but could be an interesting challenge for Carney given where he's going, is on climate change, which is still, a major existential crisis. Yeah. And a major thing, a major project. And of course, it was a big deal for the Trudeau government. And Carney has taken it in a different direction so far. That's making a lot of people, both inside his team and in the broader outside world, very cautious. The electric vehicle mandate has been paused. There's speculation that he might roll back the oil and gas emissions cap, and that's why Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is so happy. There's not even this, there seems like they're soft pedaling 2030 and 2035 emissions targets. We're talking about climate competitiveness instead of climate action.
I guess that leaves me wondering, Dan, do you think that hurts Carney politically?
I don't think it does right now because look at the opinion polls. people are not focusing on that particular issue as much as they did in 2015 when Trudeau put that front and center of his platform. It still care. People still care.
People write into the House about climate change a lot. Yeah.
But they care more about affordability, housing, all those other things. I think where it's a fine balance, and he needs to make sure that it's not completely pushed aside for political reasons, because I think for a certain part, like certain group of voters, it's still important. He needs to show them that he still cares. It's also something that he needs to keep in mind about his own caucus, right? Because there's a whole bunch of MPs, Liberal MPs, who got elected in 2015 or 2019 under that particular program, and they still care for that. I think Minister Guilbeault would have a hard time if the whole thing was completely pushed aside. Yeah. And you're probably wondering, what am I still doing around that table? You know, him being a former environmental activist in Quebec. So that's a balance exercise that he needs to practice around the cabinet table, around the caucus table, I should say.
And Jason, that idea of balance that Dan raised, I mean, Danielle Smith likes to talk about a grand bargain when it comes to pipelines in particular, right? Yes, she believes they're likely to get their pipeline. They're on the path to getting a pipeline, but it has to come with carbon capture and storage, sort of trying to find this pragmatic balance, which I think is also what Mark Carney is pitching on something like the budget. Well, we're trying to be pragmatic. We're trying to find a balance. How do you think that plays? I'll say out west, but I imagine how it plays in Alberta versus like Vancouver.
Yeah, I was going to say, you ask somebody in Victoria versus somebody in Leduc, they're going to they're going to see that balance very, very differently. You know, this goes back to the whole phrase that Carney blurted out at one point, talking about decarbonized oil. Great, you can produce oil with virtually no emissions, or trap all the emissions in a pipeline and sink it down in a underneath Cold Lake or whatever it is exactly. But you're still going to burn it at the end of the day. And there are still people, based on years and years and years of thinking about this, who see another oil pipeline as a problem. You think about the grand bargain that Trudeau got by getting, Alberta to commit to some carbon reduction and carbon taxation back in 2016. And all that thanks he got from his political base for buying that pipeline. They still bring that up. So Carney faces that. And I think Dan's right that the liability, you'd think that the problem is that if he goes too hard on, away from climate, he could bleed votes to the NDP. The NDP, that poor party that got one question at the 18th at the end of question period on Monday.
He doesn't have to worry about the NDP crisis. I will say that's one crisis. It's not a problem for Mark Carney.
One thing he can just sit and watch. But it is the caucus. It is the caucus where that is going to be a big thing. And I would also say where he's going to have to manage both caucus and a major crisis is Israel-Gaza. As as we talk today, troops are going into Gaza City, where hundreds of thousands of people still live. And there's this he's at the UN. He's talked about recognizing Palestinian statehood next week. And there is a big international and national debate and sensitivity on that, but within his own caucus as well. That's a whole big crisis to manage very delicately.
And it is going to be at the forefront as he goes to the United Nations next week and says, as we understand it, that everything is pointing towards him saying that Canada is going to formally recognize a Palestinian state, which is, going to shake up the conversation, I would say, both within his caucus and here in Canada. Yes. And then Ukraine, I would say, too. We talked about Christia Freeland at the beginning, but there's the question of just how far Canada is willing to go on that front in a post-ceasefire Ukraine. Could there be Canadian troops on the ground? So he's got
He's opened that up. He said it was a possibility
when he was in Ukraine.
There.
So there's, it's not like things are, while people may not feel that Canada is the biggest geopolitical power, we are clearly not. There's some big geopolitical issues that he has to make some big decisions about too.
Wow. Quite a bit of stuff on his plate, eh?
Yeah, it's thus the perfect time for a house party.
I think we'll have enough to talk about over the next little while, yeah.
Okay. Oh, I don't think we're going to run out of topics. Should be fun.
Yeah. Okay, well, that is it for House Party this week. We will be back on next Wednesday. Thank you to my co-hosts, Jason Markusoff, Daniel Thibeault, and to the production team, Kristen Everson and Jennifer Chevalier. Remember to catch my other show, The House, in the same podcast feed, landing every Saturday morning. As I said, this party is back in a week next Wednesday with another big, burning political question.